Our Warriors hashtag is community creates change. Helen Taylor is doing just this. Let's talk a little bit about Helen. Extensive career in the field of, well, you're going to find out. So hold on, everybody. She is the vice president of impact at Exodus Cry, originally from London, UK. She's been involved in the fight against sex trafficking for over a decade now. She'll fill us in about that. And she's done outreach to those in the sex trade in red light districts around the world. Her U.S. team reaches individuals on the streets, strip clubs, brothels, online, local jails, offering love, support, resources, and most of all, assistance. Helen is the primary author of Exodus Cry's Intervention Manual, a guide for reaching those in the sex industry, which has been used to train hundreds of organizations, churches, and teams worldwide in how to start and sustain outreach to those in commercial sexual exploitation. The website, everybody, exoduscry.com. Exodus has reached approximately 35 million. I'm sure that number's even higher, Helen. 35 million people. Hooray. Let's go. Welcome, Helen Taylor, to the Warriors.
Thank you so much, Lynn. It's really great to be on your show with you and connect again over these issues that I know we're both so passionate about. So we were just talking earlier, we met in New York City protesting at Times Square, and let's go on as we started. And that is an issue. This is an issue that we are both extremely sold out on and have dedicated our lives to fight. And so I love everything about the work you're doing, and I'm just honored to talk with you today.
Oh, and you make me so happy. See, we're smiling now. For those of you out there that complain, I don't smile enough. I'm smiling right now with Helen. Take a screenshot. Now, Helen, before we jump into everything, yes, we were in Times Square. Protect children, not porn. We're going to get into that. I want to put out a little warning that the discussion today, warriors listening, will be and watching, will be about perhaps sex trafficking, sexual assault, sexual exploitation, pornography, whatever is the reality out there. Helen and I will be speaking about it. So buckle up. You've been warned. Helen, let's jump in. But first, I want to ask you something. I always like to start with, what really makes somebody tick? What do you want to share with us about yourself? It can be your background. It could be your hobby. Whatever you want to share that's kind of personal that I can get out of you that we can share with everybody.
I currently live in California, and being someone from the UK, I never take a single blue sky for granted. So feel very grateful to live in a state with such beautiful weather. And not too long ago, I was looking at the little sailboats out on the ocean, said to my friend, we should do a sailing class. That would be so fun. So for my birthday, we did that. And showing up, we found out that it was actually the boot camp course to get your sailing license, that there was a whole 100 question quiz that we both had to do, and luckily we both passed and now have our permanent sailing license accidentally. So I tell people I accidentally became a sailor, but it's a real joy to be here in the States. I've been here for coming up to 12 years, moved out here to be an intern at Exodus Cry, and now the vice president. So it's been a really beautiful journey. And I just feel very at home here in the States. But all my family is still back in England.
Wow. Now, do you go back and visit often, or once a year, or how is that working out?
Yeah, usually at least once a year. And if I have a work trip in Europe at any other part of the year, I try and hop over to London as well and see my folks.
Look at you, world traveler and a sailor. Now, you're a sailor, which actually, Helen, if you have to escape, because I'm thinking now in the US, we have to have like escape routes with everything going on. There's so much happening. You can jump in a boat and you can get out, kind of thing. I'm very serious about that, as we have to think in those terms, disaster terms and things like that. I live by the Hudson River here in New York, and I say to my husband, we're going to swim to the other side to New Jersey. I'm fully confident I can make it. I'm not sure about him, but I'll put him on my back to go straight across. I got it all planned already. And I also want to reinforce, you are the vice president of impact. The most important thing in working with any of these issues, in my opinion, Helen, impact, what trickles down to the public, what trickles down to the survivor. I'm going to start with something very simple. What is your definition of sex trafficking? Because people are always surprised when I say to them, You can find trafficking in stripping, in nail salons, on your child's phone. They don't really, believe it or not, and I'm in New York City, they don't really fully understand what sex trafficking means.
Yeah, yeah. And we find as well a lot of people confuse migrant smuggling with trafficking, or they see prostitution or the glamorous, glitzy, seeming from the outside aspects of the sex trade and don't connect it mentally to sex trafficking. But under international law, it's simply whenever there's an element of fraud, force, or coercion of either a child or adult, but anyone under the age of 18 who is in the sex trade is technically a victim of sex trafficking. And that will be important if we start talking about SB 1414 in California later, because that definition, if there's a 16-year-old in a strip club, if there's a 15-year-old on the streets being exploited in prostitution, it doesn't matter if they say, but I'm here by choice or not. That choice is irrelevant when it's a child. And the vast majority of survivors of prostitution that I've worked with here in the States and around the world, when you hear their story, they either entered the sex trade as a minor, so when they entered, they were a victim of trafficking, or they had a third-party pimp who was profiting from them, and the psychological coercion and manipulation and exploitation that occurred in their journey into the sex trade. You'll understand that the majority of people who are exploited in the sex industry would actually be classified legally as a trafficking victim. And obviously, I would never tell someone how to identify in their own story and journey. And so there are some survivors I know of who say, I don't really like to use the word trafficking victim. I prefer to say just a survivor, or I survived the sex trade, or a prostitution survivor, because I think still to this day in the public's mind, there is a narrow stereotype of trafficking. And what's important is just people understand that in the system of prostitution, there are so many different forms of exploitation that takes place, and trafficking is just one specific legally defined pathway into a very violent, dehumanizing, misogynistic, and egregious trade.
Yeah, I'm finding also, Helen, a lot of the survivors, like I always say, like, how do you want me to refer to you? Or when I write something, they hate the word like survivors. They hate even more the word victim, you know? And so we need like a better word. So I have a suggestion. They're warriors. That's all.
Yes.
They're warriors. That's my new thing I'm talking about. Okay, I want to get into the mission of Exodus Cry, but before, because you brought it up about this SB 1414. Now and I'm in New York, this is bothering me, Helen. This is eating at me. I do have 2 children who live in California. I mean, they're grown, they're adults now. So I'm there frequently, and so I feel connected also to California on some level. What's going on with that? Explain what this is, what happened, and what will the future look like for this?
Yeah, well, just to catch everyone up to speed, a year ago, Senator Shannon Grove introduced SB 14, so SB 14 is called, that sought to reclassify sex trafficking of a minor as a serious felony. And that came up against some quite wild opposition, to the point where Governor Newsom intervened and called for a revote because the bill was shot down, and there was a big press backlash. He was quite embarrassed about it. And so that did eventually pass. And she introduced this bill this year as the kind of the next stage, SB 1414, so the kind of 2.0 that went after the demand side of trafficking and sought to criminalize sex buying of a child. So keep that in mind. It wasn't even of an adult. It was an adult purchasing a child in the sex trade for the purpose of a commercial sex act. Sought to classify that as a felony. It's currently a misdemeanor. And a lot of people were really shocked to find out that it's currently a misdemeanor in California, myself included. I honestly was not aware that that was still on the California books. And so from the start, everyone involved in anti-trafficking in California thought, well, this is going to be a no-brainer. It's an adult purchasing an exploited, trafficked child, by definition, in the sex trade. That's going to pass easily, surely. And I've been present in numerous committee meetings up in Sacramento, and been working closely with Senator Grove and her team, and was just really shocked at the type of opposition a bill like this got, to the point where they watered down every single aspect of it, from it being a felony to a wobbler, giving prosecutors the option of how they would like to prosecute, removing 16 and 17-year-olds protections unless they could be, they themselves could prove that they are a victim of trafficking. And I say in the legal terms, like someone is a victim of non-consensual content being uploaded or a victim of violence. But I 100% agree with you, Lynn, that it in no way defines someone's identity for their life. But just in terms of legally, if a child is a victim of trafficking, under the TVPA, 16 and 17-year-olds are included in that definition. And so it sent out the message, 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds are technically for sale in California. It'll just remain a little misdemeanor. And it was watered down from prison to jail time, a first time offense to a second time offense. But to Senator Grove's credit, she has stood up and fought for survivors time after time. I've been seated next to survivors in committee meetings who were weeping, just like, well, I was trafficked at 16, and my lawmakers in my state just saying, sorry, it's a misdemeanor. It really undermines the horrific violence that they've experienced. And I mean, the mind boggles as to all the reasons. Why? Is it political? Is it that some of these legislators are involved in sex buying themselves? Like, what is going on here? Because I know that there's other forces at play, and there's a real resistance to increasing penalties for anything in California. And I know that there's serious reforms needed in the prison justice system. I ran a program for at-risk women in jail for 4 years in Missouri. But for crimes when it's against women and children, specifically children, I think we should all agree that we need to keep communities and the public safe. And if anything requires a prison sentence, it should be purchasing a trafficked child for sex. So the bill did at least go through. It's made some strides. So any improvement I'm grateful for, but I'm just disappointed the policy in its original form wasn't fully passed. But there is always next year.
There you go. You know, but isn't it sad, Helen, because I'm finding myself here in New York sometimes saying, we'll take what we can get. And then, but I don't understand this at all, leaving out the 16 and 17-year-olds, still minors. I don't understand who would push back about this. I really don't. I don't know what to say about it. It's evil. I don't understand. There's a lot of money involved, always, right, with all of this stuff. But my goodness, I couldn't believe it. I saw a video, forgive me, I don't remember her name, where she like quit on the floor or something. She was so upset. She said, "You people, this is crazy." I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And she said, why would you do this to some man who was voting against it or something? I don't, but here's my concern always, Helen, with the warriors, about the victim, survivor. We have to use those words because that's what we use kind of for shorthand, but they see something like this, somebody who's been through this terrible, maybe they're a little older or something, or maybe they are 17, and it gives out that message again, like, we don't care about you.
Exactly.
And that, to me, I think is so incredibly sad. But like you said, there is always next year. And I have a feeling a lot's going to change in the upcoming months. I'm just going to say that. Now, let's get down to Exodus Cry. What is the mission at Exodus Cry?
Yeah, well, thank you for even sharing in the introduction. A lot of the work that I've been personally involved with at Exodus Cry is working with survivors and doing outreach all over the world in places where the sex industry exists, in red light districts. I feel like as the years have gone on, the mission of Exodus Cry has become more focused on prevention. And if we look at trafficking and exploitation as a tree, we really want to pull trafficking up by the roots, go after demand. And what fuels a culture of demand is the pornography industry. And we made a documentary interviewing former sex buyers who've bought women and children exploited and trafficked in the sex trade. And all of them pointed to being exposed to pornography as children, and that being a common thread. So we felt like that addressing that aspect goes after the root of the root. And so in the last 4 years, we've been really focused on the intersection between pornography and trafficking. Began a campaign that became a movement called Trafficking Hub, seeking to hold Pornhub accountable, and then began campaigning the Protect Children Not Porn campaign that you mentioned, to pass age verification laws. And Lynn, since that day that we protested in New York, there wasn't a single state that had introduced age verification then. Now we've seen 19 states pass age verification, and it's going up to the Supreme Court in January. And hopefully, if there's a favorable outcome to that, it will pave the way for all 50 states. So a lot of Exodus Cry's work is now around campaigning for better policy and cultural shifts. But another part of our work is making films and documentaries, which people can watch for free on YouTube, on the Exodus Cry channel. Netflix, one of our films is housed on Netflix. And our founder, Benji Nolo, is a filmmaker. And so about 12 years ago, I think it was, our first film, Nefarious Merchant of Souls, came out. Mm-hmm. And it's been a real joy to see, not just here in the States, but around the world. A lot of people have told us that they started their anti-trafficking organization because of that film, or they became therapists because of that film. They went into law enforcement, specifically criminal justice, to hold traffickers accountable because of that documentary. And so I think that the power in a film to really awaken hearts and change people. We say films change people and people change the world. And so that's another major part of our work, is creating these documentaries and then screening them in really key locations in order to change laws and mobilize whole communities. So it's not just about awareness, it's about awareness unto action. If we want to shift culture and if we want to change laws, then we need to reach the hearts and minds of people who aren't educated about this.
Beautiful. And I'm going to have in the body of the video, Helen, all links to everything, right? Because you have wonderful videos. And look, people are visual, right? People respond to film. Yeah. You and me, let's be honest, you and me could talk till we're blue in the face. But if they, seriously, but they see a movie or a short documentary, they respond to that. That is so the way to go. Absolutely. And if one good thing came out of that whole period a few years ago, I don't even want to say the word, frankly, is that it connects us. You know, you're in California, I'm in New York, we can talk online, we can share these films online, we can really get in there with this prevention. I wanted to ask you, since you started this, what have you seen with sexual exploitation, the biggest change? You did mention the pornography, which I still think you do a wonderful job at Exodus Cry with all of that. These campaigns with the public, we have to keep getting the public to understand, because it occurred to me, I was in Washington recently, I was sitting in the room, Helen, and I'm like, we're all talking to each other in this room. Like, we all know about this already, right? Yeah. We have to get it out there to the public. And that's what Exodus Cry does through films and outreach and through the legislation and all that, which is that key that I think is missing in so much of all of this work. But Exodus Cry is doing it. But what do you see as the biggest shift? Because I didn't even know until you brought it forward, you know, a couple of years ago with Exodus Cry, about the role of pornography, how it really played into and continues and is escalating. And certainly our children are being exposed to this. But what is the thing you see that's changed the most over, I don't know, the last decade or so?
Yeah, well, I think the stories are what connect with people's hearts and minds, and you need robust data to back up real anecdotal cases and stories. Yeah. But for the public to be able to hear these stories, and in the past it was through newspapers, and then with the explosion of the internet, that has connected us a lot more. And even, I mean, documentaries were a really niche form of media years ago. Now with the streaming platforms, with Netflix, so many more people watch documentaries. It's more of a genre film, and so I feel like from so many angles, the real life stories that we're wanting to, because you know, stories can impact laws and impact lives. And so sometimes I think about how William Wilberforce, who is a personal hero of our organization, for him to have gotten over 2 million signatures on a petition, just the amount of riding in a horse and carriage around England to try and get physical signatures. And if you ever saw that film Amazing Grace about the movement that he was part of and really led in the UK to abolish the transatlantic slave trade, towards the end, there's this petition that's rolled out in Parliament. And for all the toxic and harmful aspects of technology, I really feel like we are able to spread a message. We had over 2 million signatures on one of our petitions that we started, and for that kind of level of awareness and virality, we made this short animated video about Pornhub that got over 30 million views within a few days. And I just feel excited about the use of social media in order to bring about widespread change and campaigning, and for people to just hear about the message. I think people in 192 different countries signed that particular petition. And so I do feel like that has, the world is more connected because of that. And I want our movement to really harness that in favor of the work that we're doing. Plus, I think the whole conversation around pornography has really changed in recent years. And the culmination of that campaign in 2020 was Nick Kristof from the New York Times, who we interviewed him at my apartment in LA recently for a podcast that we did. His piece, The Children of Pornhub, was a real tipping point moment. And so I feel like the power of media and journalism is so important. I feel mostly encouraged. I think you have to stay optimistic in this work. You can't just focus on the losses. You have to stay focused on the wins, because lives depend on it. And I need to always keep my focus on what is possible and in what ways we are seeing breakthrough and progress, because we really are. And so many times in random different environments that I'm in, I'm aware that the conversation way outside of our bubbles around pornography specifically has changed, and people understand that there's trafficking videos on porn sites, that kids are being exposed to it, that there's really bad regulation on porn. And that wasn't even a conversation people were having 4 years ago.
You hit the mark on the head, because at least now people really are discussing it. And when I say people, we do a lot behind the scenes with focus groups and also schools, parents. I decided a few years ago, we got to get to the parents and caretakers and educate them, even more so than the kids. That's another program, to make them aware. I can't take one more mother who says to me, no, that's not happening. And I say, yes, it is. And here are the facts and here are the stats. But we always have, take actions to help you. I think that is the most important thing, handing somebody to take action, make it easy for them around these complicated and uncomfortable subjects that a lot of adults do not want to talk, to their kids about. They just don't. But I always say we have to have open and honest conversation, age appropriate, beginning, out of the gate almost with kids. What do you say about that with children? Because we see how it's speeding up. Since Protect Children, Not Porn, 4 or 5 years ago when I started all this, it has sped up the predation. So we have to be the educators and leaders. What do you have to share for parents listening, caretakers, family members? Because families today make up all kinds. We have kids living with aunts and uncles and different relatives. The dynamic has changed. It's not always mom and dad. I'm very careful. I like to point that out. What would you say to these caretakers with kids?
Yeah, well, I think it's so unbelievably important for parents, caretakers, to be aware of what's going on, and be having conversations with your kids, knowing that it's not if they'll be exposed to porn, it's when, and for them to have almost like media literacy of understanding,
Yes.
to know to be empowered to say no. I think that's just a really important parental concept in general, empowering your kids to say no to what's harmful. And unfortunately, pornography is now among those things. But even if a parent is doing the best job that they can, they have all the best filters on their computers. And if any parent listening to this is maybe not even fully aware of how to get those on their devices, we have a whole section on our Cry website with resources and all of those kinds of protections. But I just feel really bad for parents and caretakers right now, because even if you're doing the best job you can, all it takes is for your child or a child within your care to go to a friend's house or be at school, and they're exposed to violent, hardcore, potentially a real video of a real assault on a porn site. And so that's why we're empowering parents. We're saying have these conversations before the porn industry gets to your child, age appropriate. I love that you highlighted that too. And make it, the whole sex talk should never be just a one-time conversation with a child. child. It should be an ongoing conversation where you, as a parent or caretaker, are established as a really trustworthy source for that child, that they know they're never going to be met with shame or judgment, but that you are a safe person for them to confide in, for them to share with. But we are really looking on holding the websites accountable for exposing this type of content to children. And yes, it needs to be laws passed on the device side, where devices come already with porn opted out automatically, so that you have to opt in, and there's a lot more parental involvement in that on the device level. But porn sites need to be fully held accountable for, and we believe that just as in the real world, if you buy a porn magazine in a store, even though that's not the way people are accessing porn right now, but you had to show a government ID to prove you're over 18, and we just want those same laws in the real world applied online. And now the technology exists that's incredible. You can even verify your age using your hand with modern technology, and we are trying to get laws passed that demand that every single porn site has to abide by policies that require age verification, third-party encrypted apps, encrypted technology. People's privacies and data through this means, at least, won't be exposed. And I was actually undercover in a porn convention meeting seminar in Hollywood a year and a half ago. Someone within the porn industry gave me their wristband to sit in on that meeting, and they said, I think this meeting might be about extra cry, because the whole theme of the meeting is how do we push back against these anti-trafficking groups trying to legislate against us. And so I sat in that meeting. They mentioned Exodus Cry several times. They mentioned a couple of other organizations several times. And I just kind of was like, oh, Exodus Cry, who's that? And hoped that I wouldn't be recognized. And luckily I wasn't. But at that time, Louisiana had just introduced age verification a couple of weeks before. So this is January 2023. And the whole mood in the room was they're legislating against us, these big $1 million anti-trafficking organizations. They're squashing our little porn industry. We've got to push back. We've got to fight back these laws trying to restrict us. They're taking our money. They hate us. We've got to fight back. Like, it was very military language in the room. And I just thought, wow, there's no universal recognition in the porn industry of we should be protecting children from this content. Right. We label our industry an adult industry. That they were mainly concerned about money, and that was just disappointing, but not surprising. So this, for people who are unaware, this is going to the Supreme Court in January, and it's definitely a really important case that needs to be followed, because the porn industry are suing Texas, saying that age verification is unconstitutional, it's burdensome, it infringes upon an adult's First Amendment right to be able to access this content. And the porn industry has never come under such scrutiny or for at least a generation. And so this Supreme Court decision is going to be really pivotal for how pornography is legislated. And we just often compare it to big tobacco, and we say, look, that the goal of the big tobacco campaigns wasn't, arrest people for smoking. It was to raise awareness of the harms and connections between tobacco and cancer, and bring about some regulations so you couldn't smoke in public. You had to protect children and second parties from that. And I think that when it comes to regulating pornography, that needs to be the approach of how do we regulate exploitation out of porn and protect kids from watching it? And I don't know how much porn is going to be left after that, but that's our approach anyway.
I think it's very positive. I think all of this is very positive. Our children cannot be exposed to the levels. It's been a free-for-all with. Right. And I remember one woman said to me, Helen, a few years ago, who was probably close to my age, I saw this as a child and could never unsee it. Mm-hmm. And that was like she found things of her father's or something. She didn't go into detail, but that always kind of stuck with me. Like, once seen, you can never unsee, right? And kids are curious anyway. But, always and you can explain this a little bit better. I always want people to understand the porn today is violent and vicious and horrendous and children involved. This is not just, two people making love or something like that. This is a lot of horrible stuff. People need to understand that when we talk about porn. So I think we're going to see some very positive changes, and I know we are. I just feel it about that. What is up next for Exodus Cry? I know you have your upcoming gala, correct, at the end of October. Tell us. So tell us what's up next. What can you share that's not a secret about Exodus Cry, and tell us a little bit about the gala, because we certainly want people, certainly if you're in California, to be going and supporting and helping.
Yeah, well, I think we are on the verge of selling out. There might be a handful of tickets left, but yeah,
Good news.
our gala is October 26th down in Orange County, California. But if you're listening, there's still a handful of tickets left. Yeah, we'd love to see you. And it's only the third one we've ever done, but it's a really fun time of even just celebrating what's happening and being able to connect people with the work and mission of our organization. I'm glad that you mentioned that quote from that female friend earlier, because we made a documentary about the harms of pornography exposure to children. It's called Raised on Porn, available for free online. Some of the feedback we got from that was that it focused a lot more on the male experience of porn addiction, and that there really wasn't a lot of research or investigation on female porn addiction and how porn impacts girls and women. And so we're actually making a documentary all about that, interviewing just female experts and female first-person interviews about how porn has negatively impacted their life. We're actually putting all of our films on our own platform. We're developing a platform that will be coming out in January, where some of our films that will have never been released before are going to be showcased on that, as well as our films that are already out. And we really want it to be a library that we eventually add other films and documentaries that others in this space are making, so that we have one place to point people to, almost like a mini Netflix of anti-trafficking films. So that's coming up. We've been just having different governments from different nations reach out to us asking for advice around passing age verification. So that's something that's really exciting, that we're able to even educate governments in different nations who are looking to pass these laws, because things that happen in America are influential, and vice versa in the UK. The UK was one of the first nations to pass an age verification law, and that had an impact over here in the States. But yeah, so we've got new films coming out. We'll be doing a new campaign as well, all about uprooting trafficking and the importance of addressing demand and looking at this at a systems level. And yeah, as always, just love partnering with groups such as yours. We just did this event a few weeks ago at the United Nations about age verification. We'd love to see you in person again, and just always believe whenever there's an opportunity in front of us to educate people on this, it's really important to do so.
And that, I have to thank you for that, because I brought along a group called the Wonder Girls.
Yeah,
and they are high school girls, and a couple are, they graduated from Wonder Girls. They're beginning college. They were like freshmen in college. I have to tell you, and I told them what this would be about, very, transparent about. I think I even asked you about, like, what is this documentary or something? You said, well, it's a trailer or something like that. I recall. I wanted to make sure they're prepared, They left there feeling, they all said, and that was a group of about, including the adults, women with them, that was close to like 20. None of them actually had any idea, they're all New Yorkers, about this.
Wow.
So thank you, because that group alone, they are building, they are powerful. The girls empower each other, kind of thing, and it's really spreading out. So I was so proud to be able to bring them that day and let them experience this and hear the speakers. We had a beautiful survivor speaking, and we did have a male talking about, the porn and all that. And I'm glad you brought up about women in porn, because a lot of women are coming forward saying that this started as a child or a teen, this addiction, because we do traditionally, I think, male porn. But I want to bring up one other thing before I have to let you go, is we also can never forget the male voice in all of this. Right now, I was just told this by law enforcement, the fastest growing demo in all of this exploitation is the boy, and the teen boy and young man. And I didn't know that, Helen. I was just told this 2 days ago. And I was also told that 50% plus of all male victims come through San Diego. And I asked, and this was law enforcement, I don't know if you heard any of this or know anything. I said, well, why San Diego? And this was different law enforcement. And I'm not like judging them or anything because we love our law enforcement. We work with them, but they're like, we don't know why. So I guess that's the way to go to the other states. There's got to be like this answer of why all these boys are being filtered through that whole San Diego area. I don't know. Did you hear anything about any of this?
No, and even just to clarify, when you say boys being an increasingly overly represented demographic, do you mean as underage victims of sex trafficking or online sextortion?
Actual sex trafficking. I'm sorry. Actual sex trafficking. It's the largest growing demo, they tell me, sex trafficking. And I thought that is disturbing, but it's also something we really need to talk about. The male in this. I do want to ask you a little bit about demand if you have a few more minutes, because increasingly, here in New York, we fight for the equality model, right? We want to help people, but hold those who cause harm accountable, basically. Why is there not more? I know Exodus Cry does it. I think here in New York, there's such a pushback against, ending demand, talking about demand, holding those people accountable who cause harm. Why? Yet, as evidenced by, it's a whole nother program, Helen, get ready. But this Diddy case, where now I've been doing a lot of media with that. They've been coming to me where already they're doubting the victims. It's like the victim is always doubted, not trusted, the justice system. I understand we have to have proof about everything with the law, but right away they go to not trusting. No wonder people don't come forward and report things when they're not believed or taken seriously. Yet we don't talk about those who really are purchasing and harming.
Yeah.
What can you share with us about this? I think it's very important we focus on this also and concentrate on this demand.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to specify that aside from the sex buyers who are intentionally seeking young children, most sex buyers are they're not checking someone's consent. They're not checking if the girl is 16 or 18. There isn't one type of good guy sex buyer who doesn't buy trafficked girls and women and only buys those quote unquote consenting to be there. And then another bad group of sex buyers who only buy the girls and women who are trafficked. It's all lumped into one. And so where you have a normalized, both culturally and legally, demand, just as we see in countries like the Netherlands and Amsterdam, Spain, Germany, where prostitution is legalized, they become hotbeds of sex tourism from countries where sex buying isn't legal or as accessible. And so I think some of the pushback comes because people are nervous, or they're like, but some of these, we don't want to harm the consenting individuals in the sex trade who might choose to be there, and they might not want their clients to be criminalized. And it's a very odd angle or approach. It's trying to prioritize the rights or preferences of potentially the most privileged group who might have choice to be in the sex trade or not. Well, what about all those who don't have a choice, who are being exploited, who are being trafficked? They are the most vulnerable. They're the ones who should be prioritized legally. And so for those who don't know what the equality model is, it started in Sweden in 1999, and it criminalizes sex buyers at a felony level, jail level offense, prison level offense, and pimps third parties. Brothel keeping, owning a brothel is illegal, but it decriminalizes people being exploited in the sex trade, offering them services to exit. And I spent some time in Sweden a couple of years ago. I did a lot of research into this law and the impact of it. There's currently 8 nations that have implemented it, and Maine became the first state to adopt a version of it. And we call it partial decriminalization because it just sets the right understanding and narrative of how we should understand and frame this issue. People being exploited in the sex trade should be offered services to get out, not just services to stay in there, remain being exploited. They need housing. They need actual services and programs and support and jobs, being able to get out of this dangerous, violent industry. And then for sex buyers and third parties, including pimps and traffickers, they should absolutely be criminalized. And as you well know, there is a big movement to fully decriminalize all aspects of the sex trade, including sex buyers and pimps. That's in the small print. But we know that people still need to be held accountable in this. But I worked with one survivor who'd been arrested for prostitution 103 times in over a decade, had been trafficked since she was 15, and she was never once offered exit services. Not once did a cop ever try to understand what her situation was. And so we really need better understanding on this whole issue. And we made a documentary called Buying Her, all about understanding the demand side of trafficking. So I would love people in January when that comes out to be able to watch it, because if we don't understand who the sex buyers are and their journey of getting there and what laws need to be implemented. I'll just say one thing, that the chief police from Sweden, a detective called Simon Hagstrom, told me that one of the main cultural benefits of passing this law in Sweden was that it made it unthinkable culturally to have sex and money in the same category. It was like, it's a human rights offense there to purchase someone's sexual consent. If money is involved, that's a form of coercion. Like if you weren't paying them, by you paying them, it's acknowledging that they're not freely giving their consent. And so sex acts and money do not belong together. It's considered a very shameful and not cool thing to do or be a part of in Sweden. And a strict law really helps frame that. And so, yeah, then you have over in Amsterdam where there's women advertised and sold in brothels in windows. And I'm like, in a post-Me Too world in 2024, for me, and I was just there a couple of months ago, walking down these alleys, and there's hundreds and hundreds of sex buyers all milling around, all ogling. These women who many times I've done outreach with the women behind the windows are from Eastern European countries, from extremely poor, vulnerable communities, don't even speak English. They have very tragic stories. They find themselves in Amsterdam, these mafias running these brothels, and these sex buyers from all over the world, but many from London, from England, where I'm from, they are consuming these women as though they were pieces of meat. And I really hope that people take an increasingly critical view of the sex trade, not of the women in it, more of a compassionate understanding approach of what pathways led these women into it, and the tremendous factors that pull women into exploitation, but a critical approach in saying, culturally, is it good for society for everyone to be watching porn and meant to be buying women in the sex trade? Like, no, that brings so much harm for every party involved. And so imagine a world where that isn't the case. And so I'm really grateful for countries like Sweden that have pioneered that on this issue. They are doing it really well. And we want to see more states and countries follow their lead.
Absolutely. Last question for you. I keep saying last question, sort of, but I can't help it, Helen. Promise me you'll come back. We'll speak more often, because, there's so many issues and changing. First of all, I see an Exodus Cry Film Festival. I think that should be coming up. We can get together all over the United States and all these different things you're doing there, and have a total camp retreat with all these films. I like that idea. Again, I'll list everything in the body of the video. I have to ask you, the Sean Combs, aka Diddy case, as they call him here and in the media, what do you want to say about that?
Just that it is a travesty that some of these individuals have been able to operate in broad daylight for so long. It kind of seems like another Harvey Weinstein situation of so many people, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, they all knew. Well, if you all knew, then what was taking so long? And we know that with Epstein's situation, he was there were other individuals who benefited from him being able to have evidence to use against others. And so him creating almost a honeypot of evidence of being able to blackmail others, other powerful individuals. I've heard some of the video testimonies of some of the victims of the P. Diddy case, and some of the most dark, disturbing anecdotes that I've ever heard. And I really believe what these women are saying is completely true. I feel like in the last, since 2017, really, since Harvey Weinstein and the Me Too movement, in every industry of power, these kind of things that have been operating for years and years, sometimes decades, are coming into the light, and there is finally justice, finally accountability. Sometimes not as much as I would like, but I feel encouraged that for whatever reason, I don't know if this case against him was taking place for years and years, and I know some law enforcement dedicate years of their life to trying to go after some of these cases and feel really disheartened and frustrated when they fall through. But my hope is that in any industry, whether it's music, TV, movies, sports, politics, religious institutions, in whatever communities or structures of power or industries where there's levels of unchecked power, there's all kinds of corruption and problems that can follow. And I'm really glad that some of the survivors are finally being heard and believed. I hope that justice takes place, and I hope that those who were involved in exploiting women, girls, boys, that their names do come to light, and that it serves as a warning. I really hope that we see a cultural change. I believe we have seen a cultural change in just the last few years concerning all this, but there's clearly a lot more to be done. And I hope that survivors just feel heard and have their day in court, and that there is justice, because the things that I've seen and read and heard have been completely disturbing, and I'm sure you feel the same.
I feel dirty, Helen. I have to take a shower. It's disgusting, the abuse. You know, I started, Helen, in the music business many decades ago. Fast forward to the 90s, we were hearing things when Diddy came to be. Again, I never saw it, you know, so I didn't have the proof, but we heard then. I wouldn't be surprised. This is just an whole extortion kind of ring with this videos we're hearing about. I'm very curious, but I'm glad, you know, you pointed out, let this be a lesson, because people are so desperate for fame and fortune and getting their kids involved in music and Hollywood and all that stuff, that if it seems too good to be true, it is too good to be true, right? Like, they're not, there's lots of talented little girls and boys and things like that. I'm trying to go with this. I understand, you know, people want to rub shoulders with celebrities, influencers and all that, but it leads to no good, because it's always vulnerable, right? It's always vulnerable people. So I want this to prove not only justice for all of the victims eventually. We have in excess of 15,000 that have come forward. Did you know that, Helen? 15,000? Now,
it was over 3, but I didn't know it was that
no,
high.
it was 3,285. And then a lawyer in Houston who's handling a lot of these cases so far, he hired 100 people to vet and to research and to, you know, try to get medical records from some people and all that kind of stuff. And the hotline got over 12,000 calls prior to the weekend. So now we know some of them are not legitimate, right? But every lead has to be followed. So he hired 100 people to work. I mean, this is just incredible. This is just, you know, how many are complicit, how many are involved, from drivers and entourages and bodyguards and medical. They're talking about IV drips and who got sick and had to be brought out, you know, in an ambulance. Who knows? But I also want this to be a learning point for everybody about that. It is not ever what it seems. Nobody's inviting you flying across America to Southampton here in New York, you know, in your white outfit, to just rub shoulders, and you mean nothing to them. You are a piece of meat or somebody to be abused. And also for any victims of sex trafficking, that there is justice here, right, Helen? So they see something, because with Epstein, I'm sorry, I don't think we really ever saw it to the extent we should have. We have one person in jail, a woman, right? The other person's gone. But what about all the other people involved? And there were whispers for years. I'm a New Yorker about Jeffrey Epstein. Again, I wasn't there. I didn't see it firsthand, but it's like it was right in front of us. Everybody was always making whispers about him. So let this be a lesson that conversations are opening up. People are becoming wiser. We've got Exodus Cry. I will have everything in the body of the video, exoduscry.com. You're also on Instagram. You're also on X. I still call it Twitter, though. And I want to thank you, Helen. It was such a pleasure to meet you, you know, recently in New York. learn more about this age verification. Very important for everybody to know about. We have to continue educating on that. And also just for the work you do day in and out, Helen Taylor, you really are such a leader. Your dedication and commitment, I was telling you earlier, just helped me do my job. I couldn't do it without you and Exodus Cry. So thank you for taking the time today. Thank you for joining us. Again, please promise me you'll come back more often, because we have to keep brainwashing everybody about these issues and get them on board and help them understand how urgent, critical, and crucial these issues are. Thank you, Helen. You are a warrior indeed.
Thank you so much. Right back at you, Lynn.
Thanks, Helen. Take good care. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.